What's your definition of marriage? Stay tuned, we're going to talk about it next. Hi, I'm Sue Jeffers for Libertarian Viewpoint. Libertarianism is all about liberty, the exercise of freedom that doesn't impinge on the rights of others. We constantly hear the drum roll of government solutions. This show's purpose is to allow you to see for yourself why non-government solutions are a better alternative. Today our guest is Dale Carpenter. Welcome, Dale. So what got you involved in advocating for non-government solutions?
Nice to meet you. I have been an advocate of individual liberty and limited government since I can remember. I think this is part of our history and tradition as a country, and it is part of our constitutional heritage. So in advocating these principles, we are living up to the best of our history and to the best of our fundamental law.
So when we go to the ballot box in November, we're going to have a constitutional question on our ballot. It's going to ask us to define the definition of marriage as being between one man and one woman. And it's kind of interesting how this ballot question got to the ballot. We've had over 120 amendments added to the Constitution, the Minnesota Constitution. And in the state of Minnesota, we have a Defense of Marriage Act. But apparently the Defense of Marriage Act wasn't good enough. So when the Republicans took over control of the House and the Senate over in St. Paul, knowing that they had a Democrat governor, that they would never get this kind of legislation passed, they chose the very unique way of bringing it to the people of Minnesota, and they passed at the very end of the legislative session. It was very contentious. They passed it through the House, through the Senate. Constitutional ballot questions do not go to the governor for a veto. They go straight to the ballot. So they just bypassed the governor. And you're here today to talk about that constitutional amendment.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
And you are part of Minnesota United for All Families. And Minnesota United for All Families, you're a board member, but you're not speaking for them today. You're speaking as an individual, but you are a board member there.
That's right.
And you're going to work hard to make sure people vote no.
That's right. We think now that we have this vote on the November ballot, we have to make a decision as citizens whether we're going to actually pass this or not, whether we're going to vote yes or no. And I'm part of a group, and I personally believe that Minnesotans should vote no.
Okay, this group that you're a part of, it's a lot of people. It's Democrats, tell us a little bit about who this group is.
Minnesotans United for All Families is a broad coalition of people from all walks of life, all political affiliations and ideologies, religious and non-religious, who oppose this amendment for their own reasons and for some reasons that I think all of us have in common. It includes Republicans and Democrats and independents and libertarians and Green Party members and people who don't have a partisan affiliation, conservatives and liberals and libertarians, as I said, religious groups, labor unions, people who have different views on every other question agree on this question, which is that we should not have this amendment.
This is going to be a tough battle for you guys. Think about it. It's passed in, 31, 32, 33 states? And now it's Minnesota's turn. What makes you think you can convince people to vote no?
I think you're right, it is a tough battle. It's going to require a lot of work. It's going to, unfortunately, require a lot of money, and it's going to take up a lot of time.
How much money?
Well, one never knows exactly how much, but
I think back to some of the other states, it was millions and millions of dollars.
California, they spent $40 million on each side. Now, California is a much larger state than Minnesota. The media markets are much larger and they're much more expensive. So I don't think we're going to reach that level, but we are probably looking at a several $1 million campaign on each side. And so it's going to be expensive.
Is
and
this
I think
money that comes from outside of Minnesota as well, trying to influence this?
money on ballot initiatives on amendment campaigns in Minnesota can come from any source. There's no limit on. It can't be from a foreign source, but inside the United States, it can come from any state. It can come from a corporation, from an individual, from an association, and there's no limit on the amount of the contribution. It simply has to be reported to the state that the contribution was made. And so this will be an expensive campaign, there's no doubt about it. But I think you asked what is different about Minnesota. I think there are a couple of things that are different about Minnesota. One of them is that we've had a sea change in opinions about the issue of same-sex marriage and whether we need to have these constitutional amendments just over the past few years, and especially among young people. If you look at the polls now, we're seeing polls of young people between, say, 18 and 34 are now saying by about 70% that they oppose constitutional amendments and actually support marriages for same-sex couples. So that's a big change. And attitudes even among older voters have changed. Attitudes among Republicans have shifted more in favor of allowing people to get married. That's a big difference. The second big difference is I think we are learning from the experience of other states who have now recognized same-sex marriage, that when you let people get married, especially when they're raising their own kids, it doesn't hurt anyone. And in fact, it only helps the people who can get married. It helps the stability of their families. We've got evidence about this now, so we don't need to just guess about it.
How many states have said gay marriage is okay?
We now have same-sex marriage in 6 states and in the District of Columbia. And we have full recognition of civil unions that allow same-sex couples the status and the privilege, but without the title marriage in many other states. So we've got a considerable portion of the country now living in states where this is allowed, and there have been no harmful effects. So that has changed.
There are a lot of cities in Minnesota now who are starting domestic registry things in their. I'm trying to remember if it was Eden Prairie that was the last one that did it. So get this, for $25 you can register that you're a couple, and then if you break up, you got to pay another $25 to unregister. I think it's a revenue raiser and a political statement, and that makes me mad, you know, that Eden Prairie or whatever district it was that they did that. But you think the definition of marriage, you really think it's going to pass this time?
I think we're going to win, and I said because I think attitudes have shifted, and I think people are realizing there's no harm. There's another difference, and that is that in Minnesota there's a slightly higher barrier to passing an amendment. You have to actually get a majority of all the votes cast in the election, not just the ones where people make it to the end of the ballot. And so for people who are unsure about how to vote, they may decide, you know, I don't want to vote on this issue. I don't think it's something I should even be voting on. And if they make that decision, then they will count against the majority for the amendment. And if that had been the case,
leave it blank,
they leave it blank.
It's a no vote.
It counts against the majority. It counts as a no, effectively, if people just don't want to vote on it or what have you. If that had been the case in California with Prop 8, which is the ban on same-sex marriage in that state, then Prop 8 would have been defeated.